What is the dumbest idea you have ever had that actually worked? In my freshman year of college, my grades were really not great. And my parents were really strict about getting good grades. When my dad asked to see my grades, I panicked and did the inspect command on the computer where you can change typefaces on the screen to read different words and letters. I changed all of my shitty grades to good grades. My dad was so happy that I did good my first year of school. He asked me to print my results. I did. And turns out he had to send them to our car insurance company for a good student discount. Ultimately, I committed insurance fraud by accident. But I got the discount. Life hack: commit insurance fraud. When I was like 7 years old, I was playing in my back garden with those incredibly bouncy little balls you got. Just bouncing them high off the house and letting them bounce randomly before trying to catch them. As you did. One time I went for this huge throw off the wall and it bounced crazily off various surfaces so fast I completely lost track of it. So my 7-year-old logic was to stand back in the same place and throw another ball the same way. I watched it bounce this way and that about 10 times before finally hitting a plant and coming to a rest in a flower bed. I went over to pull back the foliage and sure enough there were both balls literally lying touching each other in the mud. At the time I was like, yep. Makes sense. But over the years since then I've often thought about it and how the hell it worked. I used to do the same thing. As I threw the second ball I would say, brother. Go find your brother, worked way more often than it should have. Wearing a motorcycle helmet while snowblowing. I did it because I missed riding. It kept my face warm and when snow would fly back at me the visor would protect me. OMG, this has to be the stupidest looking activity. But so effective. Snowblower extreme. A storm broke a limb on a tree hanging over my house in my backyard. But it was still hanging on by a few splinters. I didn't want it to fall. And it wasn't in a place where I could use my ladder to get to it. So I found some rope. Tied a brick to it. Threw the brick and rope over the limb. Made a crude rope swing. And swung and pulled at the branch until it finished breaking. It wasn't until I was using the chainsaw to cut it up that I realized how many times during my stupid idea I could have easily hurt or even killed myself. It's funny when the part of the plan that involves a chainsaw ends up being the least dangerous. Our power was out due to a storm. I had a camp stove to use for boiling water to make a coffee pour through. But I couldn't use my electric grinder for the coffee beans. I tried fashioning a mortar and pestle but it was taking too long. So, I put the coffee beans in a couple of Ziploc bags. Placed the bag right behind a car tire. Then ran over it back and forth a couple of times to crush the beans. Worked like a charm. A friend and I once snuck 15 people into a warped tour by giving them some bracelets from a party supply store and clipboards full of paper. Walked up to the side gate and said we were with Rock the Vote. The security guard waved us right in. I forgot to bring a resume to a job interview. But I had an index card in my bag. I cut the index card in half and wrote my name, my contact info, and creative problem solver in my best handwriting. And gave a copy of my business card to both the interviewers. I got the job. I mean, you weren't lying. When I was young and broke I bought a sofa from a used furniture store. I had no way to take the sofa home. I went to a used car lot a couple of blocks away and took a truck for a test drive. Back in high school, I stopped by one of my teacher's rooms after class to ask him some questions about our homework. When I walked in, I noticed he was grading some of our tests. Of note, all of his tests were made up of multiple choice. True, false, or matching, and all of the answers were bubbled in. What I noticed was that instead of using an answer key to grade, he was just placing a stencil over the paper with the correct bubble punched out. The stencil wasn't transparent, so all it showed was whether we bubbled in the right answer or not. Flash forward to our next test. And I'm stuck on a T-F question. Knowing how he graded, I figured I'd bubble in both T and F. And if he caught it, it would be easy enough to claim it was an accident. Well, he didn't catch it. And I used that trick the rest of the year for a little extra boost on all of his tests. Not my idea but my mom's. I dropped one of my earrings and couldn't find it, so she threw my other earring on the floor and it happened to land next to the first one. Brother. Go find your brother. Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Put Jesus in his Wi-Fi password in church. It worked. Ha! Jesus really is the answer. He is the way, the truth, and the Wi-Fi. No land cometh to the router. Except through me. I'm stuck on a cliff. But if I jump at a really sharp angle at that gravel field, I could just slide down there and be fine. Just like in TV, every time I think about this I am amazed I'm not either flattened by a rock or impact against something. Childhood really is just the tutorial level sometimes. Childhood is just a game in attempting death in any way possible. Calibrating the body's limits. In college I was taking a class that required me to purchase an online textbook and workbook that was registered under your name. Basically ensuring that each student would have to buy a new online copy each semester instead of buying used textbooks. I had a friend who took this class a semester before me, so we came up with the idea to message customer service and explain that I had recently gotten married, so my last name had changed, and I legally changed my first name from my friend's first name to my first name, and I would need them to change it in their system. It totally worked, and the rep even congratulated me on my marriage. I think it's nearly criminal to enforce students to buy new books instead of used ones. Especially when it's the professor's own textbook. Real estate told me I had to have the carpets professionally cleaned, wasn't in the contract, or I'd lose my $800 bond. I did some research and found out I could become an accredited carpet cleaner as there are no official licensing boards in my state. So, I did what any sane person would do. I paid the $85. Did the online course and got my certificate. Registered a business name, ABN, etc., etc. All free, handed the property management a copy of my accreditation and an invoice for services. I became a professional carpet cleaner and launched a vacate cleaning business that is still going 6 months later. This idea could have easily gotten me fired if it went wrong. I was working as art director at an animation studio, making videos for clients. One client was especially pesky about the use of yellow in the background. They wanted it to be that of their logo, which was this horrible neon piss yellow. We advised against it. But after numerous calls we had to cave and gave a version with that color. They hated it, and asked for a change. What followed were 12 versions with numerous calls in between tweaking the color over and over. Eventually I got tired of it and just sent the original version again. I didn't even bother to rename the file. The client said, "This looks exactly the way I wanted." Thank you. How that ever went right I still have no idea. Bet my husband I could fix the dent in the car with a plunger. It worked. I got rear-ended one time, right around Christmas, and had a dent in my back bumper. That summer I had enough spare money to go get it fixed. But when I looked at the bumper there was no dent. As the weather got hotter, it caused the bumper to expand and eventually it popped back into place. I used to know a guy who, every week, would order his Saturday night curry for delivery while sitting in the pub and then walk over the road to the curry house and get it and himself delivered home. This went on for about 10 to 12 weeks. One week, we were sitting having a pint and the owner of the curry house walked in, took his order, and had him picked up from the pub. He said it was easier for everyone concerned. That's the most British thing I've ever read. I once faked being sick when I was in middle school and told my mom I had a sore throat and felt a cold coming on. She took me to the doctor and it turned out that I did, in fact, have strep throat lol. Task failed successfully. Maybe the doctor was being a total bro. Dressing like a redneck to pick up chicks. Went to college in the South but the guys there were all very preppy. I thought because a lot of the girls grew up in the South, they would be drawn to more of a redneck vibe that not many people on campus had. So I bought a camo fishing hat. Literally had 3 girls start conversations with me that day. Nice. There was a swarm of hornets that had made a nest under the front of our porch with only one specific narrow entry in or out. Spray wouldn't work and it was right under our front door. So had no way to keep exterminating them. Then I realized, why not wearing blades of metal? We did have an old 50s metal fan and I could maybe blow them away from the entrance so they had no way to get in. The unanticipated effect was that it worked. Though after a few hours had created a Civil War battlefield of dead or dying hornets piling up like a zombie tower in World War Z. Every few moments you'd hear thunk as another hornet fell into the trap. So satisfying. Far from the dumbest working idea in the thread. But I once got an extra day to work on a video project in high school by coming to class with a video that was just a quarter second of blackness. Eagerly volunteering to go first. Then acting confused and scared when the file didn't work. The teacher took pity on me and told me to just bring it the following day. And I got to finish it that evening and still got full credit as if I did it on time. I once completely blanked on an essay assignment and didn't realize till I was sitting in class. Luckily, the teacher didn't collect the essays till the end of class and I proceeded to write the whole paper in my notebook during lecture. When people were handing in essays, I went up and told the teacher that I forgot to print it. But I had a version in my email, showing him the handwritten one to prove I had completed the assignment. He let me go print it and I typed the whole thing up in like 5 minutes. Ran back, handed it in and got like a C or B. Couldn't argue that since I was about to get a 0. I just got PTSD imagining writing an essay in class again. Was really desperate to leave past employer after 15 years. Had been applying and interviewing and striking out. Finally got an interview at a place where, at the time, I felt, meh, I am not really sure this is right for me. But anything is better than where I am at. Instead of prepping for the interview, rehearsing answers, etc., I pulled an office space. I was cocky, brash, unconcerned. Made it seem like I was happy where I was at and didn't really care if I got the job or not. They called me back the next week and I waited a week to return their call. Same deal with the second interview. When they offered me the job, I hemmed and hawed, said I needed to think about it really hard, and that it was a big move for me, etc., etc. I came back and demanded well over $15 above what they were offering in salary. They accepted. I hated my math teacher and she was making us do a project on patterns even though we were in 7th grade. So my pattern was a series of increasingly longer sideways penises. She didn't even notice and I got an A. Surprised you didn't get the D. The teacher sure did though.